Hello everyone, and welcome to my infographic poster, which will explain in detail my answers to the questions we've been discussing in our INT 210 class so far. So you will see that I've personalized my poster a bit by creating a little representation of myself over here. And of course I had to personalize it by adding little flags on the blackboard and a plant over here because I love plants, and of course I'm wearing my glasses. So yeah, I guess this would be a pretty accurate self-representation of how I see myself teaching in a couple of years. So I'll just start right ahead and answer the first question, which is, what does the term culture mean to you? I think there are many ways to answer this question, and I also think that our representation of culture has evolved a lot lately with the expansion of technology and social media. For me personally, culture is a very general term and it is hard to define it. So that's why I will rely on the teacher training manual to help me answer this question. So the first thing I will say is that when we talk about culture, I feel like we have to talk about the social components and the fact that there has to be some type of sharing between a group of people in order to have culture. And that's why I chose to put this little icon over here right in the middle, because I want to express that this sharing dynamic is at the heart of a process, a much larger process, and that would be the relational aspect of culture. If we go back to our discussions in class, this relational aspect would be actually described as the primary culture of society, where a set of social behaviors become a reflection of a lifestyle or a set of attitude or beliefs. And that could be represented through any specific habits, really, that are associated with a culture. Like, for example, when we say that Canadians are overly polite with their friends or strangers, this would be a specific example for primary culture. Now, of course, culture also relates to cultural objects themselves, like books and video games or art in general. So that would be any kind of physical interpretation of culture that is produced intentionally by the people. And this dynamic between social behaviors and cultural objects brings me to think of culture as an organic process that adapts to customs of a society and grows with it. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to show here, that it's really an organic process. Now, for the second question, which is, what do you believe is the teacher's role in the student's cultural development? I'll just go ahead and say that as future teachers, and especially as English teachers, I think we have the privilege to have access to a lot of cultural baggage, and by that I mean that most of us share great interest in literature, television series, movies, music, sports, video games. I mean, there are just so many ways for us to involve cultural aspects on a daily basis to our in-class approach. So for me, the teacher's role is to act as a facilitator, and so that's why I'm trying to express here with this little compass. So as teachers, we have to guide students through this infinity of cultural representations. And actually not only guide them, but we must teach them how to become active participants in their cultural development. Because ultimately, that's what we're trying to do over here. We're trying to get them to gain a sense of self by encouraging our students to create positive outcomes of their interest, whether they like to read or to write or to watch movies or to listen to music, really. I mean, our role is to ask them to reflect on those interests they have and to come up with their own perspective of what they see. And in a way, I mean, we are really asking them to build their identity, especially when we think of teachers at the secondary level. So we really have to be careful of what we present them in the classroom and how we present it as well. We have to keep an open mind and have a sense of what is going on in their lives if we want to be asking the good questions. Because in order to act as facilitators, we have to make them feel like their interests are important and also that we are in synchronicity with these interests. Now, for the next question, how do you relate to culture in relation to Falardo's approach? Well, the best way to describe my own relation to culture would be through the integrative evolving perspective, and that is because I see culture as a way to develop my students' point of view of the world. And I think that this approach is really interesting, especially in the ESL context, because as English teachers, what we really want is to get our students to produce in the language that they're learning. And so there's no better way to do that than by asking them to share their ideas or their thoughts. So by constantly seeking for their thoughts or their opinion, well, we get them to use the new language that they are learning, and we teach them to become critical thinkers at the same time. So this goes back to the sense of self I was explaining earlier. However, it hasn't always been that way for me. I think that my view has evolved in the last few years, especially, and that I used to be a lot more interested in completing a task or getting to the end result than by finding my own answers. So what I realize now is that at one point in my life, my relation to culture was a bit more like the instrumentalist perspective, because I often forget to reflect on my own experience of learning. And finally, the last question. How can teachers, particularly in an ESL environment, effectively teach culture? So, of course, I think that one way to effectively teach culture in an ESL environment is to include literature and technologies in the class, since it is the best way to acquaint our students with the values of their culture. And that's one thing that Suleiman mentioned in her text as well. So by creating pre-reading tasks like brainstorming or activities of skimming and scanning, we can actually get our students to better understand vocabulary, and it gets them to question what the meaning of the words are as well. So that's one effective way to do it. Another way to effectively teach culture is, of course, to make our students feel like their interests are important. So it's also about asking them questions about what they like to read or what games they enjoy playing, whether those things are Harry Potter novels or John Green's novels. I think we should be taking great interest in them. And actually, we've talked a bit about this with the Douglas and Celie Brown's reading. So what I want to say about it is to never underestimate the power of popular culture. There is a lot of material to go through with pop culture, and it has the power to start great conversations amongst our students as well. Because what it does is that it takes their learning a step further, and it really recreates the world they live in. So by using cultural objects that they find relevant, we allow our students to make the most out of them. It just helps them to enjoy learning, and it also asks them to engage with culture on a much deeper level of thinking, since they have to examine specific aspects in order to complete a task. So by taking advantage of a worldwide phenomenon such as Harry Potter books, for example, we can actually get our students to genuinely engage in what they're doing. And just like that, we're able to create the perfect learning environment where our students will be able to reach the balance between challenge and motivation. So, I guess that's about it for my cultural poster. I've had a lot of fun to create this, and I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation. Thank you.